It's easy to murmur when you're on the bench. How many times do you watch the Vikings and you complain? What are they doing? It's like, be quiet. You're sitting in your chair at home. Guess what? It happens in the church too. People say, well, why don't they do this? Why don't they do that? Well, why don't you get up and help? Oh, we're just getting started.
Yeah.
All right. Well, welcome to the Lighthouse Hub podcast. We're so excited to have you here. Man, it's going to be a good day. Why? Because I've got an amazing guest. We're going not 2 on 2. I guess it's more or less a 1-on-1. But you are in for a treat because we've got some amazing conversation ahead of us because we just believe that the Sunday morning message deserves conversation throughout the week. And we just want to be that, create some content that can inspire you in the middle of the week, no matter what you're going through or no matter where you're at, just to hang out for a little bit for you to listen in on our conversation. And hopefully this can inspire you to have a conversation of yourself. We don't just want to be a service or a podcast or these kinds of things, but we want to cultivate a family here at Lighthouse. So we pray that this could just be a little bit of juice, a little bit of pep in your step, like a little bit of spiritual Starbucks, if you will.
Oh, yeah.
I have an amazing guest that I want to introduce to you. If you've been at Lighthouse for any length of time, this won't necessarily be an introduction, but almost a re-hello, because you've seen him shred the guitar. You've seen him absolutely belt out some amazing worship for us, leading us into the presence. Today, we have Andrew Frederick here on the podcast. Let's all give Andrew a shout.
I love that. I need that everywhere I go.
Yeah, we all need a little bit of an applause. Well, thank you, Andrew, for jumping on the podcast.
Of course.
We've hung out at your place. I would say a time or two, but just that
One time
we've hung out so far. Man, we've just hung out, and I've so much enjoyed your friendship and just the sharpening that you give to everybody that I've been able to benefit from. When we were hanging out, I was like, man, me and Andrew could have a podcast.
Yeah.
And this is it right here.
Yeah. At least maybe the start.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So thank you for being on the podcast. But I'm excited to get into our conversation because I've been enjoying this series.
Yeah.
Upside Right Kingdom. It's been super cool. It's week 4 or 5. I've lost track, but the title of the message was it actually had 2 titles.
Yeah.
A call to serve and to die is gain.
Yeah.
I loved that message personally. I was really encouraged by it. I love the picture that Bill is like painting with the series, spending so much time in the book of Acts, because like even just to take example like this Sunday's message, we looked at the character of Stephen, which is my favorite character in the book of Acts.
Okay.
Interesting. Yeah. I love Stephen.
Why do you like him so much?
I like him because just because of a story. Like a lot of what Bill shared, I think that was one of the icebreaker questions with Paul and Evelyn on the first podcast here, was who's your favorite character? And I just like Stephen just because of his heart, the fact that he lived a life that got Jesus to stand. I just think that's so cool. Like to stand. Some people say like a standing ovation or just a stand to take notice or just those kinds of things. I just want to, one of my favorite scriptures, probably my life verse. And if it's my life verse, I probably shouldn't get so confused with where it's at. It's either 1 Chronicles or 2 Chronicles. Pretty sure it's 2 Chronicles 16:9, which is basically says, for the eyes of the Lord roam to and fro throughout the whole earth, looking to show strong support. Maybe I'm paraphrasing, looking to show strong support to the one whose heart is blameless, or towards whose heart is fully his, all according to what translation you look at. Just the idea of Jesus looking down from heaven and taking notice. I just love that so much. Stephen was somebody who lived a life to the umpteenth degree, and I would like to have a life and a legacy that would have Jesus like looking over the balcony of heaven, like this guy is who I just love the story of Stephen. And so I was stoked about this message. And the picture that Bill even painted in just this message was a big picture. It was one message for one guy spanning two chapters. So you're able to see him. You're able to see the needs that were in that community and why they even picked Stephen. This crazy situation that Stephen got caught up in, and his like stick-to-itiveness and of following the Holy Spirit, and what it ultimately led to. It's like, wow, you got to see the whole picture instead of just like one verse about that. You got to see the whole picture. And not to spoil where we're going with the conversation, I just even want to let you know, if you're listening to this and haven't listened to the whole message, you are doing yourself a disservice. You need to go listen to the whole message and then come right back to this if you want. But yeah, I don't want to spoil, but like even the character that we get to meet at the end that Stephen left an impression on was just, I think it's just one thing leads to another. So a series like this, you get to see the whole picture, and I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I love that about spending 8 weeks in a book.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
But definitely, I would love to see you share this podcast with somebody. So if there's any fire emojis that you think are worthy of sharing, we would sure appreciate a share, a like, comment on this, comment your thoughts. We'd love to see this. This is meant to bring community, so we would love to hear what you have to say about the podcast. So I want to go into the first clip that we'll react to, and I loved that he kind of touched on this. This was on the call to serve half of the sermon, talking about complaining and grumbling and what that's about. So let's react to this clip of Pastor Bill here.
The concern was that the distribution, the meeting the needs of a group of people, the widows, wasn't being met. So that's the physical need, but friends, that's on the surface, and that's always the way it is when there's grumbling. There's always a reason for it in the physical, but there's a bigger reason. There's a spiritual problem. And it's coming forth in a physical problem. So we can focus on the physical problem people are complaining about, and they do, but we can't overlook there must be a spiritual problem that's being masked by the physical need. Are you with me?
Yes. So grumbling and complaining there's always a physical reason, and it has a spiritual root. Back in Acts chapter 6, I believe, there were widows that weren't getting taken care of. And maybe it's because they were a different culture, a different race, and they were being overlooked, whatever the situation would be. But people were raising their voice and saying, hey, this is a need, da-da-da-da-da, and not just raising a need, but there was some complaining that was there. I thought that was a pretty interesting point. Something that I take from this is that because if one perpetuates complaining, it's oftentimes really hard to find a solution. It's like, oh, yeah, and another thing. Oh, yeah, and another thing. Oh, yeah, and another thing. But one thing that I appreciate with the people who instated Stephen and Phillip and some of the other guys is that they were, like, solution-oriented. Mm-hmm. Like, the people may have been grumbling, and that's, you could look at that in a lot of different ways, but, like, the leadership in the situation where the people were grumbling, they're like, hey, let's put this to rest. Let's see what we can do, because we value people. We value physical needs being met. We value spiritual needs being met. Let's see what we can do to do that. Being solution oriented. Well, I think that's dope.
Yeah, I suppose it depends on how you define complaining, right?
Exactly.
It's like if by complaining you mean someone who is just going to forever find fault in someone else, no matter what, like no matter even if the circumstance changes, yeah, that's not good. Right, because that person is not being realistic in whatsoever. Mm-hmm. You know, they're not interested in finding a solution. They're not interested in compromise. They're not interested in actually making things better. Mm-hmm. They're just interested in, well, kind of really coaxing a feeling of you could even say moral superiority. Mm-hmm. But you know, if someone steps forward and says, "Hey, you know, we're doing this, and I don't really appreciate that," you know, that's fine. Mm-hmm. I think that's fine. And then you have a discussion about it, like, because that's going to happen. That's always going to happen in any relationship, given enough time, even just between two people. You're married.
100%.
Right? That happens, right? Yeah. It wasn't like all of a sudden, like, you found a person that you never had any conflicts with.
True.
Right? And so those conflicts can present themselves initially as complaining maybe, but Yeah, again, it depends on what you mean by complaining. If by complaining you mean someone who's just always going to gripe and grumble about anything and everything, yeah, that's not great,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's not. It's like, because at some point you need to, if you do that, if you always, because what ends up happening, I think, is that you're continually finding fault in other people. You never once stood back and said, like,
Where's my part in
is
this?
is it me? Like, am I seeing this the wrong way? Am I misunderstanding what was being said?
Yeah.
I don't know, and so yeah, going to the second part of the question is like, what happens when you get a bunch of people who, amass that? Well, just like anything that amasses something, it gains power.
Momentum, yeah.
It gains momentum and power, right? And it's like,
Hey, we've been thinking.
yeah.
Who is we? And what? And how long have you been thinking this?
Right. And so yeah,
Yeah. No, I think that is that's a good thing that you bring up. I think that your guarding your heart or managing your heart or stewarding your heart is a big thing in the midst of kind of conflict or even like speaking like advocating for people, because advocating for people could be as far as like complaining, hey, these foster kids aren't getting what they need. This ethnic group isn't getting what they need.
And imagine
it sounds like complaining to certain people.
Imagine telling those people don't complain and grumble. It's
right.
like, well, people
like,
are starving.
It's your heart posture in the middle of it. Like, am I wanting to find common ground? Am I wanting to hear somebody else out, or am I
looking for a power move almost, right?
Yeah, I think that's huge. I think that whenever that's why I appreciate the leadership or the example of the leadership in this chapter of Acts, is because like they all like recognized that, hey, we are here to serve. We're here to serve. So we're not going to like let somebody else do this, or we're not going to just let this fall to the wayside. I think that possibly when one person, because I think complaining and negativity can just be a slippery slope, when somebody has slipped and slid down into a state of being negative and complaining, they can always like push off responsibilities, push off meeting needs and these kinds of things to other people.
Oh yeah. Well, here's if you're talking about complaining as a means to an end, or not a means to an end, complaining as if that's the end, right? It's like, because I'm sitting here thinking like someone's going to bring a complaint to somebody, right, and try to work it out. But yes, there are just some people that will just do that, and that's it. They won't try to seek out a confrontation with the person they have qualms with.
For sure.
Because that, if you're just going to sit back and grumble, and that's it, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. Mm-hmm. That's all you're doing, and you're letting yourself sit in this like toxic soup. Like people use the word negativity, but I don't know if that's necessarily. It's overused. Mm-hmm. It's like you're going to be convinced that there's always problems, and part of the reason is because you didn't attempt to set it straight. Part of the reason is you.
Yeah.
Like, so and complaining enables that state. Complaining because it also, again, it goes back to if you're doing it just to like boast, you're not going to see it this way, but you boast your moral superiority essentially. Mm-hmm. Right? It's like, why else would you complain, right? It's like because I think there's a better way that So there is a component of that. And if you're complaining and you have because this is hard. Like I've done it in my life, and it's so unbelievably hard, time consuming and energy consuming. But it's like, if you have a problem, it's like, bring it to the person you have a problem with. But if you're just going to sit back and gripe and complain about it, then you're doing nothing, and you're actually just letting yourself sit in just a cesspool of negative emotion, and then you're gonna feel like you're morally justified to it.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you're not, like, at all. Like,
Totally.
it's kind of that simple. But.
I totally vibe with that, and
Yeah.
I think it is that simple. I think that's so great that Bill like shared that, and I don't know if there was anybody there or who has listened to the message that challenges, but if so, man, I hope that can lift somebody's head and kind of bring some new perspective. I want to check out this next clip we can react to about just asking what's my part about being at Lighthouse and Lighthouse being called to being a thriving church and what that takes person to person. Let's check out this clip.
So this is a encouragement and an invitation and a prompting, maybe a little prodding to say, I know some of you have served in the past. Thank you. I know some of you are waiting, maybe taking a break. I want you to know, in order for Lighthouse to thrive, we need everybody mobilized. We need everybody saying, what is my part? Is it to meet some physical needs? Is it to meet some spiritual needs? I need to put on an apron, not only a bib. I need to start fulfilling the call of God on my life because I am a believer and I am called to serve. 6 of you are excited. Praise the Lord. I know people were cheering online. I could hear them. We are all called to serve. Did I make the point of Scripture here?
We're cheering for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, but yeah, that's so good. I wanted to ask you because I just love hearing your story and because you have a church background, yes.
Yeah.
And then there was a journey there and then now being a part of Grace Church and then Lighthouse. I wanted to ask you, what benefits have you noticed in your personal life from not just like church attendance but serving, because you serve on the worship team. You definitely got a heart to serve. What benefits have you seen personally from serving?
Yeah. Well, quickly, it was Grace Place, not
Grace Place. Oh,
just,
you're right.
Just real quick.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I guess the most immediate benefit is I've gotten better at singing. So that's of course are you talking about benefits for me?
Yeah. Just in your state of mind, your experience with life, or different.
Well,
things
boy, there's been moments, like the baptism of was it Dennis?
I think that was his name.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was unbelievable. That was a moment, man.
Mm-hmm.
I think it probably fast forwarded some necessary healing for me in what seems like a moment. I definitely get really touched by when really, really strong men kind of show a little bit of vulnerability.
Mm.
And that's I hate that word, but because I think it's overused. And it's kind of becoming a little cliche a little bit. Yeah. But, that was just an awesome moment. And we were playing, Break Every Chain. And, I found out this year actually that is not like a normal thing where like you guys would just like go and keep playing the song over the baptismals. Like I just assumed that's what you always did, but it turns out last year was just kind of a thing, and we rolled into this awesome kind of loop where when people we'd bring it down when Bill would talk, and then when they get dunked, we'd go into the bridge part, which is
I hear the chains falling.
Yeah, I hear the chains falling. Yeah, and it was just like, oh, it was so good.
So
man.
you're in your spot. You're serving. You're singing, but you're getting touched.
I was getting dunked. Well, and what was funny is I think that was maybe like the second or third time I had played, and I wasn't singing actually at that point in time.
Wow,
like they didn't. I think I was just playing. And like, cause Evan,
I'm sure
Paul didn't know.
We live stream, so we got to put some of this footage on top of the video.
Yeah,
the video version of this.
Yeah, and so that was crazy. You know, that was insane. And there's just been a couple times, you know, Dr. Kuroku, is that his name? Yeah, he was there, and I was dealing with some wild, like, I don't know, headache, migraine things, and it's for various confounding factors that are can get tough to manage. But he was just like, I feel like there's someone in the right side of the room that's been dealing with migraines, and I was up on stage and I was to his right, but I was behind him, and I just kind of was like, hey, if somebody else doesn't raise their hand, then he's talking about me. And so nobody did, and so I just kind of sheepishly raised my hand, and you know, a bunch of people came and surrounded me and prayed for me. And there was a wild thing that happened. Like, well, one, I really haven't dealt with those issues since.
That's awesome.
Yeah. You know, it's not perfect, but like full blown, you know,
debilitating,
whatever. Yeah. But once they were done and I went back to playing.
Yeah.
Like, I had never played more effortlessly in my entire life.
Wow.
It was a crazy thing. All of a sudden, like, because like, I think musicians who have really tried to make something of themselves, on their own, and even being instructed, can attest to this, that like sometimes there's just, it doesn't quite all work the way you'd hoped it would work because of whatever block, or whether it's mental or physical, or, you know, not that those, I don't think there's any really two different things between those two, but there was this, I remember I began playing again, and it was just like, it was wild, man. It's just all of a sudden like fluid, like completely fluid. Nothing was stopping it. It's like, oh, well, that's, you know, that's an impact. I don't know if I'm necessarily answering the question the way you thought it, but that showed me that, you know, I don't know. I'm getting in my own way a lot of the times. You know?
Wow. Yeah.
And so that's definitely just even having like a moment where you're like, wow, this is like everything is liquid smooth. Whether it's, you know, just, well, I guess it's your entire being.
Yeah.
Right? And that's kind of that's a wild, I've never experienced that. Like, when I was going to school, like, you know, and I had to like, you know, do my juries, like it was the complete opposite, right? It's like, so I would say that's a pretty immense impact.
Yeah, I think that the cool thing to me about serving, I have had similar experiences to that, because I believe whenever we're serving, no matter what it is, whether you're emceeing an event, whether you are picking up trash, whether you are cleaning a toilet, whether you are greeting somebody at the front door, or no matter in what space or place you are serving somebody some soup or something, I think that serving people puts you in a place to encounter the Spirit of God in a way that you wouldn't if you weren't. Man, that's what I hear with you. Like, man, if I wouldn't have been in that place at that time, if I would have been doing something else, trying to just do something else that would have been good, or something for myself rather than serving a community, I wouldn't have been in that place. Whenever I was at school, whenever I was doing these things, I didn't have an experience like that. I only had an experience like that time. But what was I doing that time? Man, I was serving. I was in a place. I didn't realize that's what I was doing. And I could totally attest to that with serving with youth and serving at Lighthouse and serving at different places and times. Man, like, you feel the Lord in a new way. And I feel like I'm sure that I've robbed myself of those experiences because I didn't want to get out of my comfort zone, or I didn't want to jump out and serve somebody or participate in a way that is more than just consuming, but that is like adding value.
Yeah, and then one
cool.
thing
That's
before
cool
we move on, I know is what I loved about this part of the message was I think this is a part of a message that like the whole world could hear, because it's about serving, but to me it was also about like, you know, because going from the complaining, the grumbling to this part, if you watch the whole sermon, there's actually a kind of a fluid movement towards it.
Totally.
And it was basically like, hey, if you see a need, go ahead.
Yeah.
Right. But we live like, maybe the world has always been like this. I don't know. But definitely now there are huge swaths of the society that we live in this country that like have these complaints and grumblings about how, you know, this isn't right or isn't occupied by the right person or this or that, or like, you know, these things should be done by people who are like me, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, to me, it's always been like, well, why don't you go and do it then?
Yeah.
Go, like if you see that there's a disparity or whatever in some regards, whatever, you have the opportunity to fill that.
Yeah.
But nobody does. Nobody wants to, because they'll say stuff like, well, I don't want to. I'm not interested in it. It's like, well, that could be also another key or clue as to maybe why that disparity might exist.
Yeah.
It's like it's like if you have a hard time getting into it and going out and doing it, you know, just by the sake of you're not interested in it, like maybe
have some self-awareness.
Yeah, maybe be a little bit humble as to the reason why that need isn't being filled or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it's like, or you can go, well, screw that. You know, who cares? The need's there, so I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
And I just love, to me, Bill kind of touched on a little bit of that for me, anyways. Of course, because when you give a message, you know, it's always gonna go into somebody else's world and mix with their stuff. And so it's like, to me, it was like that. I really want the whole world to hear this, because it's like, if you see a need, fill it.
Yeah.
Right? Either that or figure out a way to understand it.
Yeah. My dad always had this quote, and I say it all the time to just people at different when it applies. My dad would always say, "Don't just talk about it, be about it."
Yeah, all right.
Such a dad thing to say. Don't just talk about it, be about it. Mm-hmm. And that's something that rings in my head, and I'm reminded of even with you just saying that, and that's so true that it's important for us, especially as kingdom people, as believers. We're not just a person with an opinion like everybody else. Like we have a worldview that says that we have some sort of an answer for some sorts of problems in the earth, you know?
Yeah.
So for us, especially, to be ones who complain as the end, that's so out of order. Mm-hmm. rather than seeking some divine revelation from the Lord of like, hey, how can this need be met by me, by others, by the group that I roll with?
Yeah,
these kinds of things,
or even just having a discussion about it.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
it's like maybe you can't fulfill that need.
Yeah,
but if you bring it up to the right people,
exactly. If I can advocate for it, and if I bring it into the right circles, yeah, that's so true. That's so true. Did you have anything else on that? I wanted to go to this to when Steven gets up in these guys' grill.
Yeah, sure. This is your Super Bowl.
No, yeah. So yeah, I love Steven, and I love his heart. These Sadducees and these Pharisees. Bill shares that they have these three false confidences. These things that they put their whole life on, and because they put their whole life on these things, they totally miss Jesus. Not only did they miss Jesus, they killed this guy. I mean, was it his design to die? Yes, but because of their hard-heartedness, they missed the opportunity in following him. And Bill talks about these three false confidences and who was even there at the time. So let's check out this clip. Let's react to this from Pastor Bill.
So what are these three false confidences? I want you to know what they are so you can see how Stephen, under the power of the Holy Spirit, addresses them. Number one is their false confidence in the promised land. The promised land then and now is very important to the Jewish people. Number two, Moses and the law. They uphold Moses and the law above being open to their Messiah. And the third one he's going to dismantle in these coming verses is their focus on the temple. The temple. And Stephen's going to address each one of them directly. He's going to show them why their confidence in these three things is false. The Lord wants to make a permanent mark in front of one of these Pharisees, this young Saul from Tarsus, who was there listening to these clarifying and just breaking down the false confidences that these people had, including Saul of Tarsus, who was murdering Christians. Why? Because the Lord wanted to get his attention. Because the Lord not only wanted to reach the Jews, the Hellenistic Jews and the Greek Jews, he wanted to reach the whole world. He wanted to reach the Gentiles. And one of those in his midst, who was an enemy of God, was about to have a permanent mark that to live is Christ and to die is gain. That if all this is true, that Stephen, who would stand in front of the Sanhedrin and declare this bold truth right in their face, if he was really under the unction and the power of God, that he'd be willing to die for it. And Stephen now, one of the seven who was called to serve, stands up before them and like with a wrecking ball, eradicates the structure of their religiosity and their false confidences. Boom, boom, boom. And he's willing to live as Christ and to die is gain. Is that serving the Lord or is that serving the Lord?
Dang, so awesome. Man, I just like that Philippians 1:21, Bill shares that in the message. That's what Paul writes, to live is Christ, to live is for Christ, and to die is gain. And he wrote that in jail. Like I think Philippians may have been one of the last books that he wrote in jail before he got his head lopped off by the Caesar at the time.
Well, yeah, he was facing some real truth, huh?
Yeah. So, or maybe one of the Timothys, maybe some of the Timothys. But man, I can only imagine the impression that left on Saul at the time. Man, this guy really is going to live for this. Really, not just live for this, but die for this. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's possible today for Christians or God's people to put their trust and identity in the things around God rather than in God?
Yeah. Not only think it's possible, I think it's the norm.
Yeah. Expound on that. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. This is, where do I want to start with this? Okay. Well, what's interesting is like some of the thing that I was reflecting on during about this message that was kind of just like, I was struggling with maybe more or less, was the idea of martyrdom and that it was being presented as a good thing. It's like it was being glorified. I don't necessarily know if that's what the intention of all of that was, but it felt a little bit. There was a little bit,
and it mixed with what you had going on, and that's what you
just
had
a little bit, yeah. And so it was kind of like, well, isn't the purpose is to glorify God, not martyrdom? And it's because it's like, well, the word, as he pointed out, the word martyr means witness. And then I went, and it seemed as if there was like this attempt to kind of tie in witnessing and, suffering for that witness and dying for that witness. And the reason why that word means what it does today is because of that. The word faced an evolution of meaning. It used to just mean simply witness. Mm-hmm. And because of what
is what happened to those witnesses.
Because of the early Christian church and what they went through. I had to look this up.
Interesting. I love that.
What the early Christian church went through during the Roman Roman Empire, really. All of the persecution that they went through, that the evolution of that of the meaning of that word
landed where it is now.
Yeah, right. So there's that, right? But like also, like I don't know, this might be a hot take, but I think that the Bible might be one of those things.
What do you mean by one of those things?
By one of the things that you put your trust or identity in besides God. And the reason why I say that, now I'm not saying that it isn't important.
Getting in some deep waters here.
Absolutely. Yeah, right. Dun, 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 dun. Well, because here's something that I've often thought about, and I've talked with Bill about this, is like, Abraham didn't have the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't even have the Torah. Jesus didn't have the Bible. He had the Torah, but he didn't have the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Right? John, Matthew, like all the people who wrote the New Testament didn't have the New Testament.
True.
All of the characters in the Old Testament didn't have the Old Testament. But yet, they're all are tales of people having relationship with God and with, I mean, it seems as if they had a closer one,
yeah.
right? Just because they don't
have one Bible. I have 7 on my shelf at home, and I don't ever pray.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Well, there's that, and also like in those stories, like God's like straight up having a conversation with them, or at least it's portrayed like that, right?
Yeah.
And we don't fully know, but like it's portrayed like that, as if you and I were talking.
Yeah.
So it's like they didn't have that thing. And so again, like I know this is deep water, but I don't know how I can rectify that. I haven't been able to. Like, so it's like clearly it seems as if it's a necessary tool, almost like a necessary rubric, like something like how you have a ruler. Like you don't know what an inch is until you put it up against the ruler.
It's like a standard.
Right. So I'm okay with saying that.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean that it isn't any less true. In fact, it might be more true, right? Because again, you don't know what an inch is until you put it up against the ruler, right? So the ruler is truth, right?
Right.
So I'm trying to cut this with a surgical scalpel here. Like I don't want people to think, well, you can throw the baby out with the bathwater and then the Bible doesn't matter. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that your relationship with Christ and God, make sure to put that as primary as opposed to your relationship with the Bible.
Let the Bible serve your relationship with
Absolutely. The man. Right. And let that be primary, right? It's like, because I see a lot of people like grow real hatred for other people. And this is someone who's like coming, I'm stepping back into this world, right?
Yeah.
And so, I might look at this 10 years from now and be like, oh, I was wrong about that. But it seems to me that like, I've seen people grow real hatred for other Christians. Christians grow real hatred for other Christians or believers. And it's like, to me, it feels a little bit like you don't have eyes to see and you don't have ears to hear, kind of thing.
It's because like you have the knowledge in your brain. You have a frequency of reading the text, but the fruit of a relationship is not there in its fullness and growing ways.
Yeah, our primary unifying thing is God. You asked the question, for God's people, do you think it's possible today for God's people to put their trust and identity in things around God rather than in God?
Because the promised land, to take it back to these guys, the promised land, super duper important. It was all throughout the whole Old Testament, it's still important. It's still important for the people of Israel today. Mm-hmm. What were the 3 things? It was the promised land. The temple was the 3rd thing, which is important and is still important. And as you look into things, and Moses and the law and the Torah, all important things, but they're not the main thing. They're not the main thing at that time. So
yeah, and
they were willing to kill somebody over those. Plenty of people over those.
Yeah, absolutely. And so
I think so too. That it's so possible for us to put our trust and identity in the things around God. I think it's so true. I think the dangers of that is that we put like our boldness or our boast or like our our life's confidence behind those things. And man, and it's one of those things where like if you're sailing and you're 1 degree off, 10 miles down the line, you're gonna be off.
Yep.
So if you're so bullheaded that you never make course adjustments, because it's not that you have to toe the line perfectly to end up where God wants you or to have the heart that God wants you. It's a life of constant adjustments. Yep. But
there's
if you're
no
like,
such
this
thing as that toe perfect line.
Exactly, right? Yep. But if I'm going this way and this is the right way and they're the wrong, I'm going against the grain with these types of people, I think that you're only going to be off. I think the dangers of that are deception, because when a person is deceived, they don't know that they're deceived. That's the nature of deception, you know. And I think that we all walk in a measure of truth and a measure of deception. But I think that to put your life's confidence in things around God rather than a connection with Him primarily, I think that really just sets you up, lays the foundation almost to build your house upon deception in that way.
You know, there's plenty of other things that people put their trust and identities into, things that are around God and not of God. But I think that's one of the probably more contentious ones, and the one that, you know, people are fine to disagree with me on that.
Talking about sacred cows.
Yeah, and maybe I hope they're not misunderstanding what I'm saying, but
they probably are. You're gonna get canceled.
Yeah, it's fine.
I'm kidding.
It itself is
so important that we put our life's confidence in the person of Jesus, and
it leads you to God. Yeah. It's a leader. It's a pointer. It's a map.
And submit to the Word in order to show us who Jesus is.
Right. Don't glorify the Bible. Glorify God. And again, the way I came across this is like, well, Abraham didn't have the Bible. That's where I started. Like Isaac, most of those people didn't have even the story of them because they were living the story.
Interesting.
So, I
have an interesting point about that. We could go down the rabbit hole on that, which is so interesting.
Sure. Yeah.
But I want to get to this last point.
Sure.
For sure. The last clip that I want to talk about is just like my whole heartbeat whenever it comes to the story of Stephen. And not to say that dying for your faith makes it real, but I think a real faith is worth dying for. And I think Stephen was an example for that. I'm so thankful for him personally, but like just of the legacy of that person, like the people in the Bible were people, right? So I want to check out this last clip that that Pastor Bill shared. We'll react to that, and then we'll just have some last words that we want to share with you all watching, listening. But let's check out this last clip from Pastor Bill.
As I read this, I thought, why was Jesus standing? And then I looked in a commentary, and the commentary said, Jesus was standing to welcome the first martyr for the advancement of his kingdom into heaven. Jesus was standing saying, well done, Stephen. Well done. I'm about to welcome you into my very presence. Probably with a crown of life in his hand. Acts 7:57. Then they put their hands over their ears and they began shouting, and they rushed him and they dragged him out in the city, and they began to stone him with big rocks. And they stoned him, and Stephen prayed, Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. And he fell to his knees, shouting, Lord, don't charge them. Don't charge them for what they're doing. Does that not sound like Jesus on the cross? Father, forgive them, for they know not what they... Did Stephen become like Jesus? He made an impression on Saul, who probably threw one of or more of those stones that day. Stephen did not make this decision to stand for Christ at this moment. He already made the decision before this moment came. So I ask you, have you made that decision today? Not only to follow Christ, but to say, Lord, I want to be found faithful all the way to the end of my last breath.
Yeah, so good. I think that like I said, I don't feel like dying for your faith makes you per se a witness, but I do believe in just like thinking and kind of praying and sitting on it. I feel like to be a witness means to give your life for a message. So whether it ends up in somebody taking it is another situation. But the truth about Stephen is that he gave his life before anybody could ever take it. So he was like, I'm going to stand for Jesus. I'm going to stand for these things that I believe, that I know are true. And he was found faithful in that moment. So I think that's so important for us to kind of realize that. I'm so thankful that we do live in America. I hope that nobody even listening to this is facing an opportunity where their life may be taken for what they believe. Also, is the faith that you proclaim, is the faith that I proclaim and live and believe worth dying for? I wouldn't die over Reese's Pieces. I wouldn't die over something novel like that, but I would die for the things that are most important to me. I love that we have that example in Stephen, and it kind of brings it home for me as a person, as an individual. What comes to your mind, Andrew, when you think that, or what are some of the things that you want to say to close the pod? What are some of your closing thoughts after?
There's so much. There's a lot that comes to mind. And I kind of really struggled with this one.
Yeah.
I don't know what I would do in that situation.
Mm.
I don't think any of us do. I think even it would take a lot of work and time spent in those convictions to stand even a modicum of a chance in a situation like Stephen's, to actually do what he did.
Yeah.
It's like, would I be convicted enough to stand like that? I think in order for me to stand a chance, I should understand that I don't know the answer to that question, because it's kind of like, are you familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect?
I've heard of that, but you say it anyways.
Yeah. So it's basically this, psychological measure of like, the more you think you know, the more you don't know.
Yes.
Kind of thing.
Yes.
The more
like
you do know, the more you realize
Yep.
that there's a whole bunch of stuff that you don't know. Well, that effect.
It's like I begin to I want to take up photography. I buy a camera and I think I'm the best photographer.
Like nobody knows this.
Yes, then the longer you get into photography, you realize that I know all this, but there's so much more out there. And then I'm like, oh, I'm in the lurch. I'm so far behind. And then you begin to even as you become more proficient, your confidence in yourself is less than it was when you even first started.
Yep.
But you're like 10, 15, 20 times more competent than you were before.
Yep.
Understanding it more.
Yep. And so like a lot of people, that term is used within the context of knowledge, but I think that's a fundamental reality of human existence, human heart, human being, human everything. And so it's the same. It's kind of the same with like, I think the broader question is like, when push came to shove, despite the consequences, would I do the right thing?
Yes.
And I think in order for you to stand a chance at even ever doing the right thing, despite the consequences, even losing your life, you have to acknowledge, you have to start with probably not. And so then you can work from there, because you don't know what it's like.
I think, have you ever heard of a guy named David Goggins? He is an ex-Navy SEAL. He's got this crazy stories. I think he's pretty sure he's written a book. I haven't read it or anything. I've just watched a lot of his interviews. And he talks about just all the hard things that he's been through and this transformation that he's had in his life. And he runs like miles and miles. Like he runs like hundreds of miles a week, like a week. Like he's this crazy robot Cybertronic type of a guy. And he talks about the hard things that he's done, and he's like, and I'm paraphrasing him, but like you'll never do something hard unless you've went there in your mind 1,000 times. Like unless you have been there, unless you've seen it, you've smelled what the salt water tastes like, you've felt yourself shivering in the cold water, unless you've been there 1,000, not 999 times, 1,000 times, you'll never make it through. And man, that struck a chord with me. And in relation to this, like I won't make that choice in that whatever the hard choice is, according to my fundamental belief in the Lord, my relationship with him. I won't make that hard choice unless I've been there X amount of times.
It way before it happens.
Exactly.
And you have to, you also, it probably helps to envision yourself in that situation.
Exactly.
And nobody wants to do that.
Exactly.
So, and then also, it's like the combination of that plus being humble enough to at least start with, I'm probably a coward, and I will probably...
How can I bolster what I would do in that moment? Because I would want to be a coward. I would want to do this. How can I prepare my coward heart
just
to...
start with, I will be that.
Yeah.
I definitely will be that. Because it's the whole thing of, like, you can't move if you don't acknowledge where you're at.
Yeah.
Because you're not actually moving because you don't even know where you are.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like the same thing with anybody who struggled with an addiction. They know that.
Oh, yeah.
But it's like you have to admit that you have a problem, that
100%.
you are addicted to something. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to move from it because you're coming from a place of denial.
Yep.
So it's like, okay, go there as much as you can without getting freaked out before it happens, and then also default with, I am a coward.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
and that's the amount of like where the God opposes the proud, to pull out a Bible verse. He opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. My wife got thrown in jail in Kazakhstan one time.
What?
It's a cool story. You should ask her about it whenever I have her on the pod.
I was about to be like, do you want to be sharing this?
And in the moment, she tells, she's like, I don't know why, but they had our passports. They were threatening us with money, all this stuff. But I was so calm. I was so calm.
I experienced the same thing.
And it's not that she was prideful, but that she was humble enough to trust in the Lord in that moment, and he was like actively giving her grace in that moment. Mm-hmm. But if she were to say, "Let me tell you who I am. I'm the baddest missionary that you've ever seen,"
right?
Then God doesn't want anything to do with human pride. Like that's the stinkiest thing to him, aside from our righteousness, which you could say that is rooted in pride, anyways. But like that pride is what repels him. But that humility to say that, man, I probably would fault.
I'd cower out. Yeah,
you
start there.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean that's gonna.
It's
you
not
actually,
your identity.
Well, that if you start there, that means you actually have a chance because you are going to acknowledge the truth.
Yeah,
which is I probably would cower out.
Mm-hmm.
But if you start there, then you have a chance.
Yeah,
it's the same thing with like. The pathway to knowledge is admitting that you don't know anything.
100%.
You know, the pathway to being good is admitting that you're not that great.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's what I love about Christianity. Because one of the fundamental tenets is we're all sinners.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's true.
You have to start there.
You start there. Absolutely. And doesn't mean that you're bad. It doesn't mean that
you're non-redeemable.
Right. Like to start with the understanding that you have the propensity to do bad things means that you might have a chance.
Yeah.
At doing great things and good things. To start with that, I'm a coward. You have a chance of moving into courage. To start with, I don't know a lot, means you have a chance of actually knowing things. It's like you have to, if you actually truly want to embody those things, you have to start with where you probably are actually at. Unless you've participated in that journey, which you probably have a little bit. I certainly have, and it's not fun.
But even still, I don't want to have a heart that would put my confidence, like talk about false confidences, right? I don't even want to put a false confidence in my own self. You know, I don't even want that to be something that I put my own confidence in.
Yeah, which is funny enough, like probably makes you a person to put a lot of confidence into. You know what I mean? It's that's the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yeah.
In multiple contexts.
Yeah. Man, well, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, Andrew. Thank you so much for your time and your experiences, man. I think that a lot of people, I should say, everybody has experiences, but not many people that I've met can speak from their experiences as articulately and eloquently and authentically as you, for real. Yeah. So I definitely want to thank you for who you are to Lighthouse and that you serve and that you're just you walk what you live. I appreciate that. I see that and I appreciate that.
Yeah. Oh, I appreciate you, man. It's I like Lighthouse is a great place where it feels like a true expression of what I think Christ hoped to establish. Yeah, because I can come in and say things like I have today, and I've had conversations with Bill about things too, and it's just like, oh, that's okay. You know what I mean? It's like that kind of, that kind of humility and openness. Equally, what you said about me exists with you and Bill and everybody who I've ever talked to here at Lighthouse.
I think that what the Lord is doing here at Lighthouse and has been doing long before we got here is so special, and I'm going to give a good chunk of my life to see it reach as many people as it can.
Yeah. So I appreciate you and everybody here, and thank you.
Well, of course, definitely everybody listening. So glad that you've joined with us, that you've been hanging out with us. Man, I know, I'm not even going to guess that you've been blessed today. I know that you're blessed. So definitely consider sharing this across any platform that you can. We would love to see you back on the next one. Comment anything. We'll shout you out on the next one. And until next time, we love you and have a blessed week. See you later.